The following is a conversation with the New York Times bestselling author Graham Hancock. He's the author of the book America Before: The Key to Earth's Lost Civilization. He's also spoken in several controversial TED events that have since gone viral over the internet. With his appearances on the Joe Rogan Experience and having sold over 7 million copies of his books internationally, he has become an internet sensation as an unconventional thinker. Today, he and I discuss some of those ideas that are said to be controversial, and together at the end of this interview, we come to a conclusion that I'm sure everyone will find fascinating. To see more interviews like this one, click the link below me now to subscribe to Meditation Magazine.
When I gave that talk, which was several years ago now, psychedelics were still suffering from 50 years of negative propaganda. And it appeared to be considered too dangerous for TED to allow that talk to go out there. But basically what I was saying is that it's hard to find any great ancient culture that didn't make use of psychedelics in its exploration of the nature of reality, and indeed in its religious and spiritual matters. And secondly, that what we're dealing with is a fundamental human right here.
Yes.
And that the laws against psychedelics are laws which contravene that fundamental human right, which is the right of the adult to sovereignty over his or her consciousness while doing no harm to others. And that seemed to me to be a fairly reasonable point of view. And I was quite surprised when TED took it offline. Of course, they did me a favor, because by taking it offline, it ended up getting millions of views that it probably wouldn't have had if it just stayed on the TED platform. I got about 3 hours advance notice that this was going to happen, put the word out on social media. Many people uploaded it, and it just went viral after that. So, you know, there's a message for the powers that be there. If you want to suppress something, don't suppress it so blatantly as that, because blatant suppression does not go down well in the modern world. And I think that we are now seeing big changes taking place with regard to psychedelics, and we're beginning to realize that they have an incredible potential for healing. Incredible potential for the integration of the self, for breaking us out of ruts and habits that we may have got stuck in. They're incredibly helpful in lots and lots of ways. And of course, ancient civilizations knew this, worked with psychedelics in a positive and constructive way. And what I call the war on consciousness, I call it that because fundamentally I can't see any reason why psychedelics should be illegal.
Yes.
There's no logical reason. We already have laws that govern our behavior towards one another. And if somebody behaves badly towards another person, we have laws that can deal with that. We don't need laws that patrol the inner sanctum of our consciousness. And that's what it seemed to me was going on here. This was the state saying, you may not think this, you may not experience this. It's against our mores and our rules. So I couldn't see any reason why they should be banned from a logical or rational point of view. The only reason that I could see for them being banned was an attempt to control human consciousness, to limit it within very narrow bandwidth that is acceptable to mainstream society, which mainstream society in general values what I call the alert problem-solving state of consciousness. And there's no problem with the alert problem-solving state of consciousness. We do very badly without it. We do need it. The problem with the mainstream position, at least until the changes in recent years, has been that they've wanted to grant a monopoly to the alert problem-solving state of consciousness, and to diminish and dismiss and to pour scorn upon any other states of consciousness. An example I often give is dreaming, which in our society is regarded as a frivolous pursuit. If you want to vaguely insult somebody, you might call that person a dreamer, implying that they're not connected to reality in some way. Whereas in ancient cultures, dreams were regarded as an extremely valid and important path to knowledge, worth paying attention to for the messages that they send to us. And of course, the same thing applies for the deeply altered states of consciousness that result from the use of psychedelics. These can be incredibly valuable in many, many, many ways, but they do appear to threaten the status quo in societies that we live in. They're an example of people thinking outside the box, of not doing exactly what they're told. And this resulted in this terrible error called the war on drugs, which really was a war on consciousness, and which was a fundamental institutionalized abuse of human rights that went on for decades and decades and decades. And we're just now edging out from underneath the weight of that. And characteristically, the way we do that is that we look for reasons why psychedelics can be okay. So that's why we're seeing the legalization or decriminalization of psychedelics, and particularly their use in medical and therapeutic context, which is great. I'm very glad that that's happening. But I don't think we should ever forget that the laws against psychedelics are in themselves an abuse of human rights. And if we do not tolerate other abuses of human rights, then we should not tolerate this. Just as, you know, there was a time when it was perfectly normal for societies to burn witches at the stake. We now realize that that was a terrible error, which our ancestors should never have committed. And I think in 200 or 300 years' time, that's how the war on consciousness, the war on drugs, will be looked upon, as a terrible error that was made in 20th century Western civilization and imposed with Western force and Western money on the rest of the world. It's going to take us a long time to emerge from the sort of dark miasma of false imaginings that the war on consciousness created, but we are beginning to emerge. And if the way out from underneath that heavy weight and that heavy burden of the war on drugs is via the therapeutic route, then great. That's whatever works as far as I'm concerned. We need to put these very bad, very unhelpful laws behind us and move on in a different direction that recognizes the right of adults to sovereignty over their own consciousness. And while saying that, I want to also say clearly, psychedelics are not for children. I do not recommend psychedelics for children. There are certain activities that are rightly preserved for adults in our society, and I believe psychedelics is one of those activities. And we're more likely to keep psychedelics out of the hands of children if they're legal than if they're illegal. We can then accompany the prohibition with wise advice. We can explain to kids why wait for this. Your time will come when you're ready for this, but at the moment you're not ready for this. I think fundamentally it needs to be viewed as an adult pursuit that relates to a fundamental right over our own consciousness.